Just to go back to the Mishnah, we're going to start. Go back to the Mishnah. This is on 50A6, Nun Amid Aleph on the bottom. The Mishnah over there was talking about if one goes from, if the second line, this 3 lines from the bottom. If one goes from a place that they did work on Erev Pesach, and they went to a place where they do not work on Erev Pesach, or just the opposite. I'm in Mokim or from a place where they do not work on Erev Pesach, to a place that they do work on Erev Pesach. The answer, we said, we put on the stringency of the place where they left and the place where they went to. So you always take the stringent position. Now turn the page to the top of 50B1, right? And then the line said, Va'al Yishane, 50B1, Va'al Yishane Odom B'pnei HaMachlokes. But a Persian should not deviate from the local custom because we don't want to cause fights. Well, if you think about it, that's a contradiction. You just said you should take on the stringency either of the place that you left or the place that you're going, which means that sometimes you're going to do different than the place where you are. And then the Mishnah says the exact words, but by the way, don't change anything about the place where you are at. Don't deviate from the place where you are at because we don't want you to have a fight. So what's going on here? So that's what this Gemara right here is questioning. Says the Gemara, goes to the thing. So now we're back on 51B2. Bishlema, the Mishnah is understandable. If you go from a place where they do work on Erev Pesach to a place where they don't work Erev Pesach, obviously you put on the stringency of the place where he now has arrived to the place where he now is gone. Obviously, they do not work Erev Pesach, so you don't work Erev Pesach. And the reason for this is because a person should not change from the local custom because we don't want to cause a fight, and you're doing differently than what's the tradition of the place where you're currently at. And therefore you should not do any work. Great. If you left a place that does not work on Erev Pesach, to a place that does work Erev Pesach, a person, once again, a person should not change from the local tradition in order not to cause a fight. And in that case, v'navid, you're therefore telling him that he should work because he's gone to a place that works on Erev Yontif. But the Mishnah right after the Mishnah just before said, we impose on him the stringencies from the place where he left or the place where he's going, which means it's not tied to where you are, it's tied to the stringency. Obviously, the stringency is don't work. So how can you explain this? If he goes from a place that didn't work to a place that does work, he should be doing he should work because of the place where he's at in order not to cause a fight, when the Mishnah just proceeded to say, take on the stringency. So Amar Abaye, he says, you're right. Aresha, these words that say, and the person shouldn't change because of fighting, that's going on the first case, the case where you left a place that works and you went to a place that doesn't work, right? In other words, don't work on Erev Pesach because we don't want you to don't cause a fight. Right. No, it can work out even the other way, where you left a place that doesn't work and you went to a place that does work, and it still could work. You don't have to work. You could take on your chumrah of where you were, that you don't work. It's different than the place where you are now, which works on Erev Pesach till Chatzos. How does it work? And this is a fact of life, which we all understand. In this case, we're not concerned where you're not working in a place where people are working. We're not that concerned that it's going to cause a fight. My karma, what are they going to say? Haroya, if somebody sees that you're not working, Are they going to say, Malacha Asura, that this guy's a frummy, this guy's so frum, and he doesn't work, his minig is not like ours, and that he doesn't work? No. Meima Amru, they're going to say what we all say. Kama betole habi bishuka. How many idle people are there in the marketplace? How many people are just hanging around in the marketplace looking for a handout and not working for a living? Right? Of course, that's the natural reaction when you see somebody not working.
Or retirees.
Or retirees. No, no one retires. Because if you retire, then your brain goes to mush. So thank Baruch Hashem for the Gemara. Baruch Hashem for the Gemara that sharpens your mind completely. Like I said the other day, I really have no idea what people who are not involved in this, what they do with their brains once they retire, right? So, Baruch Hashem for this gift. Amalei Rav Safra Rav Abba. Rav Safra said to Rav Abba, Kegoin Anan, like us, the Adinan Kaviyah Diyarchu know about the establishment of the new month. Before we go, everybody take a look at the bottom Tosfos. The bottom Tosfos says, what does this mean, the establishment of the new month? Just to remind everybody, how did it work in the ancient times? They didn't have a calendar. They went ahead and people would have to come and testify that the new moon has risen. Bezdin, the court system in Yerushalayim, would then send out messengers far and wide that the new Chodesh has been established. And as you know, for example, this month that we're having, tomorrow is the last day of the month. It is only the 29th day. This month does not have a 30th day. This month is a short month. So they would come out and then they would send out messages. The problem was people living far, far away, well into Babylonia, would not get the message in time. So that is the reason why was created Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius, the second day of the holiday in the diaspora. In reality, as we know, Pesach, there's only one Seder. In Eretz Yisrael, they only do one Seder. Okay? Shavuos, Sukkot has only one day, not 2 days. But we have 2 days. We're lucky enough to, where did that come from? That came around because we who went into the diaspora were too far away from Jerusalem to get the message in time. So we were never sure when Rosh Chodesh really was. So are we holding the right day or are we not holding the right day? So to be on the safe side, we ended up holding 2 days of all these Yom Tov. Okay? So now, in this case, he's saying, we who know when the establishment of the new month. So Tosfos says, we're not talking about that they knew how to add a day. In other words, they had an idea of astronomy and all that. That wasn't the thing. Skip to the second line. Ela Mefarish Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam explains. They were in a place where the messengers from Bezdin, the Pony Express from Bezdin, was able to reach them. They were on the border between Israel and the the diaspora. So they were still close enough that they got there. So over there, even though it was actually in their place, even though it was Chutz La'aretz, it was in the diaspora, they still, hi Charlie, they still only had 1 day of Yom. They only had 1 day of Yom. I love the new digs, Charlie. Looks great. So in other words, the establishment of the second day of Yom Tov was not simply that you were in the diaspora, but that the messengers from Yerushalayim couldn't get there. So this is what it means. Us that are Beki and Diyarchel, who get the message that the Rosh Chodesh started when the exact day of Rosh Chodesh is. So we only needed to do 1 day of Yom Tov. Now we're on the Daf, Nun Beis Amud Aleph, 52a1. B'yishuv, in the Yishuv, Loi Abdino. We should not work on the second day of Yom Tov. Because we don't want to come machlokes. So that means if we're in a town, if we go ahead and then go to a town that's further inside Bavel, Babylonia, that did not get the message, that doesn't get the message, who therefore is holding Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius, even though we know that there is no Yom Tov Sheni, because we know which is the real day, nonetheless, we should hold the second day of Yom Tov. We should hold the second day of Yom Tov, even though we know that it's not really a thing. Now look at Rashi. Rashi on top. Malacha b'Yom Tov Sheni. The malacha doing work on the second day of Yom Tov. Hoyul v'nahagu b'Yisrael. Since this place has the tradition to be asur, lo yeshane le'einayim. You should not change in front of them, in front of their eyes. Es haminik. Taisvis, the small taisvis on top. Everybody, please take a look at that. Afilu b'tzina, even privately in that city that keeps Yom Tov Sheni, you should not do work. Afilu datoi lachzor, even if your thought is to go back to your city, to Eretz Yisrael, or to that town that's close enough to Israel that gets the messengers from Bezdin. The loy epshel in malacha, because it's impossible to work b'tzina privately, kamoy shar devarim. Because if you work privately, that even privately, it will come out that this guy is working on Yom Tov Sheni. Jerry, can you tell us what happens according to the Lubavitcher's thing in Eretz Yisrael?
So, again, I sent a little note today to Rabbi Kozlarski because I want to know the Makor, because I looked at the Sefer Minhagim, and it says nothing about it specifically. But I know when I go to Eretz Yisrael, or our families go to Eretz Yisrael, the Chabadniks, basically, when you go to Eretz Yisrael, you basically keep one day. Now, of course, I can cover myself in different areas because I own land there, etc. today, but all the Chabadniks keep one day.
So it would seem from this Gemara that the logic here is, because you're going back to Eretz Yisrael, not everybody holds this way, by the way. Most people do not. But because you're going back to Eretz Yisrael, and it's dover borough, it's fixed in place that Eretz Yisrael only has one day Yom Tov completely. That's the minig hamakah, and we're saying over here, don't change the yishuv lo yabdinu b'nei shina machlokes. That's the yishuv. That is now the place. Yeah, Charlie, you had a question? Can't hear you. Let it go? Okay. All right. So the question now becomes, b'midbar mai, in the wilderness, if you're in the Sinai, okay, nobody's around. So the famous question, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? That's the question of the Gemara. Amalei told him, Hachi Amirabami b'yishuv asur, in a place which holds Yom Tov Sheni, or doesn't hold Yom Tov Sheni, as it were, according to the Lubavitchers, but b'yishuv asur, in a place that holds Yom Tov Sheni, it's asur. The midbar mutter, in the midbar, it is permitted to do work on Yom Tov Sheni when you know that it's not really Yom Tov. Zakti Gemara Vaita. Rav Nosson bar Asya Ozil mi Beirav lepumpadisa b'Yom Tov Sheni shalatzer. Rav Nosson ben Asya, who came from Eretz Yisrael, which means that he only held one day Yom Tov, and he came to Pumpadisa, which was the New York in Iraq. That's where Shmuel was. In Adoy and Pumpadisa, these were the big cities. Yom Tov Sheni shalatzer. And he came to the yeshiva. He came to the big yeshiva in Pumpadisa. The yeshiva in Pumpadisa, by the way, lasted for almost 1,000 years. It is the longest lasting yeshiva in the history of our people. Until the times of the Gaonim, until Rav Hai Gaon, all the way, there were Rosh Yeshivas in Pumpadisa. Anyways, Yom Tov Sheni Shel Atzeres, of Shavuos. So Shemate Rabbi Yosef, for having walked more than 2,000 amas on Yom Tov, he broke the Tichum, which means he kept his minig of Eretz Yisrael, which is that there's only one day Yom Tov. Came Rabbi Yosef and he excommunicated him. Why did you excommunicate him? You should have given him Malchus Mardus. You should have given him smacks for having broken the rules of the rabbinical court. Amalei Adifa Avidale. I gave him the more severe punishment. The Ma'arava in the west, which means in Eretz Yisrael, they voted to impose malchus on yeshiva students who go ahead and break in things in the matters of rabbinical law. But they didn't vote to excommunicate him. I, on the other hand, because we're in Bavel and we're not in Eretz Yisrael and things need to be strengthened, I went ahead and I'm putting him into excommunication. Stam Nidui is 30 days. When they were put into excommunication, it meant for 30 days they were completely excommunicated. They couldn't come to shul, they couldn't to daven. People were not allowed within their Dal and Amos, within 10 things, right? They couldn't be. So now, Ikadi Amri, Nigdei Rab Yosef, just the opposite. Rab Yosef punished Rab Nosson for having come on the second day of Yontif. He punished him with malchus, with lashes. Amalei Abai the opposite way. Nishtar Mar, let the Rebbe excommunicate him. The Rav is Shmuel Damet Habayah, because Rav and Shmuel, who was the Rav in Pumpadisa, Nadoy and Pumpadisa, and Rav, who was the Rav in Surah, the two great Torah citadels in Bavel, right? They said, "Manidin al shnei yomim tovim shel Goliath." We excommunicate anybody who does not keep the 2 days of Yontif of the exile, of the diaspora. Amalei, in order to strengthen rabbinical decrees. Amalei, Hanimili in Shidalma. That's only regular people. And here we're talking about a rabbinical student, the Tovale Abde, I'm doing him a favor. I got it to the Beirah, because in Eretz Yisrael they voted to give only lashes, to only give malchus to yeshiva students who break the rabbinical decrees, and they didn't put him into excommunication. Since Rab Nosson ibn Benaye is a Talmud Chacham and he's a yeshiva student, I'm sparing him the greater infliction of being excommunicated. And this is a great law. Jewish people are not solitary people. Yiddishkeit wants us together as a group. It wants a minyan. It wants shiurim. It wants people to get together. We're not big believers in too much social distancing. Okay? In other words, we do not believe in aesthetics of people going up on a mountain and being, up on a mountain away from people. That is not our way. Okay, but at all. So to put somebody in excommunication is a much worse punishment. It's akin to being put to death. That's what it is. And the Gemara in other places has much stronger words than even over here. Now it goes further. So now, if everybody can go back again to the Mishnah was again on 50b1. 50b1. So we said, just to review this. Similarly, if one transports crops of the 7th year, what's going on? Once again, in the 7th year, you're not allowed to plow or cultivate your fields. Nonetheless, obviously, things do grow in the fields from leftover seeds and etc. from the year before. The rule is as follows. As long as there's still grain in the fields, you're allowed to take grain and store it in your house for your animals and for yourself inside your barn. But once the fields become emptied out from the wild animals, from the chayas, and from the poor people, at that point, it's called kalu. It's emptied out. At that point, the stuff that you have stored in your storehouses have to be removed. It's called beer. How beer is done, there's many different ways. You can just simply nullify it and take it back, or you actually have to get rid of it. Okay, but that's the rule. So it's tied again to when the wild stuff growing is gone in the fields, what you stored away has to now be removed as well. So the Gemara, the Mishnah says, from a place where the fields were depleted, which meant that you had to get rid of your crops, to a place where the fields are not depleted, which meant you didn't have to get rid of it. Or you went from a place that had not been depleted, which means you're allowed to have it, l'makim shekalu, to a place that it is depleted, so you have to get rid of it. Chayev levar. We said you have to take on the stringency of either where you came from or where you're going, and you have to remove it. Rabbi Yehuda then says these very cryptic words. Say, go, go and bring for yourself. We had no idea what Rabbi Yehuda was talking about. Now we're back to our Gemara. So says the Gemara, what is Rabbi Yehuda talking about? The Leslie, the Rabbi Yehuda, it's not, but does Rabbi Yehuda not hold? Does Rabbi Yehuda not hold what we learned in the Mishnah? Shall we put on him the stringency, either the place where he left or the place where he's gone, which means if any one of those places are completely depleted in the fields, you have to get rid of, you have to be mevayer, you have to remove the stuff that you that you stored away in your storage house, in your barn. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shisha b'rei Rav Aidi, Milsa Chriti Kama Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda is actually talking about something else separate from what the Tanna Kama said. V'hachi Kama, this is what he said. Oy mi mokim shaloi kalu, if one moves Shemitah from a place that has not been depleted, l'mokim shaloi kalu, to another place that it hasn't been depleted. So he took his stuff from Fort Lauderdale where they had stuff in the fields, and he took it to Boca Raton where there's also stuff in the fields. So there's no problem. He should be allowed to keep it. But when he got to Boca Raton, he heard that back in Fort Lauderdale, the fields are empty. The fields have been emptied out, so that means the place where he originally was from, he would have to now get rid of, he would have to remove his tavua, his grains. Chayev levayer, says the Talmud Kama, you mechayev tevayer. That means even though when you left, there was no problems, there was still grains in the fields. When you come to Boca Raton, there's still grains in the field. You happen to hear on WhatsApp that, that back in Fort Lauderdale, okay, over there's no more grains. But you're here. The answer is, doesn't matter. If you hear that over there where you came from, that, now the fields have been emptied, Chayev levar. Rabbi Yehuda says, say, go and bring for yourself from the place where you are now, where I brought mine. In other words, I'm not going to look from where you came, because when you came, they had stuff in the fields. You're now here, you've settled here. I don't care what happened back there anymore. I'm not a Fort Lauderdale person anymore. I'm a Boca Raton guy, right? And over here, it's not been depleted. So you go, according to this version of Rabbi Yehuda, you go where I am. So say the Gemara, maybe the Rabbi Yehuda lekula kama. Are you telling me that Rabbi Yehuda is saying a leniency? Rabbi Elazar said, Rabbi Yehuda only said his rule, only to bring in a stringency. Somehow Rabbi Elazar had a tradition that Rabbi Yehuda in this case was only a stringency. We just worked it out. So Ella Epoch, and you're right, switch it. The Tanna Kama really says, instead of saying Chayev levar, he has to remove it. He actually said, Eidei Chayev levar. You don't have to remove it. If I leave Fort Lauderdale while there's still crops in the field, and I come to Boca Raton when there's crops in the field, and then I hear that Fort Lauderdale doesn't have any crops anymore, it doesn't matter. I'm here now. I don't have to remove it. Rabbi Yehuda, just the opposite. Say, go bring for yourself from where you brought it, not where you came, from where you brought it. And from the place where you brought it, the fields are now empty. When I left there, right? It had, doesn't matter. The bottom line is, we constantly pay attention. We always say about this guy, oh, that's the Fort Lauderdale guy, right? Even though he's been in Boca Raton for 15 years. That's the Fort Lauderdale guy. That's what it is. Like on Jeff, we call him the San Francisco, the Frisco kid. Abayam Omar. Okay, he's better looking than Harrison Ford. Abayam Lo'olam Kidutani. In truth, the case, it's like the first case, which is that the Tanna Kama said you have to get rid of it, and Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you're here now. You're here now. We're not going to worry about what's going on back in your old place. If a guy left the place where it was not depleted, there was stuff in the fields, and he goes to a place that it's now gone. The stuff is gone. Obviously, he has to remove it. But if in the last place, he then makes a U-turn. He went from Fort Lauderdale to Boca Raton, and then he made a U-turn and went headed back with his stuff back to Fort Lauderdale. And in Fort Lauderdale, they still have the stuff in the field. The stuff is still in the field. He does not have to be revired because the Tanakhama says at the end of the day, Boca Raton was only a visit. He's simply making a U-turn back to Fort Lauderdale. In Fort Lauderdale, they still have stuff in the field. He doesn't have to get rid of his stuff. Rabbi Yehuda, no. Say, go and bring for yourself the place where you're bringing it from. The fact is, you brought your stuff from Fort Lauderdale to Boca Raton. Then you went from Boca Raton to Fort Lauderdale. Well, Boca Raton on the second trip is the place where you came from. The place where you came from doesn't have anything in the fields anymore. You got to get rid of it. It's afraid to Gemara. The obvious question. Just because the crops are on the back of your donkey, or in our case, just because the crops are on the back of your truck, that's where they are? Don't be ridiculous. A donkey doesn't establish residency. Where you end up is the establishment of residency. So you're telling me because I happen to have stopped in Boca Raton, I now became a Boca Ratonian? That's ridiculous. So the Gemara Elama Rabashi, we're now on 52A3. We are now plugged to the Hani Tanoi. Except we're arguing in the following Tanoi. The Machlokes of the Tanakhama and Rabbi Yehuda is actually a Machlokes of other Tanoim. It's not because we learned. Hakoi be'shloishe kivoshin b'chavis achas. If one went ahead, and again it's Shavias, and he preserved 3 kinds of vegetables in one barrel. Everybody look at the Tosfos, the 4th Tosfos, just the first few lines. Hakoive shalosh kibotzim, kigoyim, lefes, ubotzel, kartoffel, potatoes, she'ain biurin shaveh, that their times of being removed are not the same. In other words, 3 different vegetables, each one lasting different amount of times in the field. So let's say the potato crop is the most robust crop. Obviously, it's going to last longer than, let's say, the onions or the cabbage or whatever it is. So it goes like this. So back to the Gemara. One who preserves 3 kinds of vegetables in one barrel, not the 3 vegetables have different zamanim, different times when they are depleted in the fields. Rabbi Eliezer oimer oichlin al harishin, and eat all 3 of them until the first of them is depleted in the field. Once the first is depleted in the field, that's it. And you can't eat the other ones. Rabbi Yeshua oimer just the opposite. Af al achroi. Even we go on the last one. Then when the last one is depleted. Rabbi Gamliel oimer kol shekola minoi min hasoda yivar mina min habekchavos. Each one is mutually exclusive. When its species in the field is depleted, then you can't have that one. Each 3 in the barrel are separate entities, as it were, and you look at them all separately. So therefore, Rabbi Yeshua over here says we go by the last one, is like the Tanakhama in our Mishnah, right? Because the Tanakhama in our Mishnah said chayiv levar when it's completely gone, when it's completely gone. Rabbi Eliezer and the other one and the first one and Rabbi Oichel al Rishon. That is the other man, the Yama. Excuse me. That's Rabbi Yehuda. What do you call it? And then Rabbi Gamliel over here is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Gamliel that said you take each thing by itself. Where you are is what the situation is. That's it. Okay? The halacha kidvarim, and the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel. Exactly Rabbi Gamliel just said, which is each thing is mutually exclusive. You take a look at it. If it is in existence, you can eat it. If it's not in existence, you don't have it. Ravina Oma, beplukte bahai tanoi. They're actually arguing in these tanoi. It's not. Ha'oichel b'timorim, if one ate the dates from a date tree, okay? What again? One ate the dates from a palm tree in Yehuda, in Nachla Yehuda. In Yehuda, which as we know is outside, is Yerushalayim and into Midbar Yehuda, ad shekolei ha'achrim shebebotzer, until the last date tree in Botzer has been depleted. Botzer is Sar. Botzer in Sar was known, Ir Shel Timorim, was known as the city of date trees. It was the Florida, as it were, of Eretz Yisrael. So it had a lot of dates. Okay? So over there we're saying, the Tanna Kama says, I'm allowed to eat in Yehuda, in Nachla Yehuda, as long as there's still dates on the trees in Sarah, even though there's a million trees there. As long as there's trees there with dates on them, it's considered not kolui, it's not depleted, you can keep on eating.
Sarah is also in Yehuda.
And yeah, obviously, right, and Sarah is obviously in Yehuda. Sarah is obviously a city in Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, and now we're on 52b1, Oichlin al shel bein hakifin. That's fine. You can eat the dates that are between the palm branches. If you look at our palm trees, some of them, as you know, have like thorn-like things on the trunk. They come out. The top is where the branches are, and you have the dates. So as long as you have the dates in the branches, you can eat it. The ain oichlin al shel bein hatziyin. But those that are the dates that are in the branch, in the bark, that are pointy and thorny, that you cannot eat. That you cannot eat. Why? Because the animals, the wild animals, can get to the dates that are in the leaves. The dates that are in the thorny part of the tree, they can't get to. So according to this man, the Amar of Shimon, it's as if it's gone. Either there still. It doesn't matter. It's as if it's gone already. So therefore, it turns out like this. Since the behemoths can't get there, that is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. That's the shita of Rabbi. If you can't get to it, it's gone. That's the way it is. In another place it's there. I don't care. It doesn't go by complete depletion. It goes by the situation that we have. Masha and Kenda Tanakama, like the other one. Tanan Hossam. The Gemara then says, Shloisha Arotzos Labir. In Eretz Yisrael, there are 3 lands with regard to beer, to removal of the 7th year. Yehuda, Ve'ever Ayaden, Ve'gola. Yehuda, Transjordan, and the Galil. And that's how Eretz Yisrael essentially is broken up into 3 big lands, 3 states. The 3 states are called Yehuda, Ever Ayaden, and the Galil. That's how they would do. Within it. And within each one, within each big, clolius, broad land, within each one, there were 3 subcategories. So 3 particulars, otherwise known as klal v'prat. There was a klal, broad generalization, 3 lands, Yehuda, Galil, and Eber Ayardeh. And within each one, there was a prati, a specification of 3 different things. So let's put it this way. In this Palm Beach County is the land, and Boca Raton, Boynton, and West Palm Beach are the 3 sublands within Palm Beach County. Okay? So now, Lama Yoimru Shalosh Artis Labir. So why does it say 3 lands for removing? It should say 9 lands, because each one of the 3 have 3 subdivisions, right? To teach us the following, because they're allowed to eat on Shemitah, on the 7th year, the produce that's coming out of the ground from each one of the main lands, ad shekulia achin shabbat, until all 3 subdivisions within a land are completely depleted. So Palm Beach County can eat on Shvius as long as in one of the places in Boca, Boynton, or West Palm Beach, one of the places still has Tevuah, right? So if, let's say, Boca Raton runs out and Boynton runs out, but West Palm Beach still has, then Boca Raton and Boynton are allowed to eat the stuff that they brought into their houses and stored in their barns. Minohani Mili, how do we know this? Amar Rav Chama bar Ukva, Amar Rav Yosef bar Chanina, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Ulevemtecho lechaya asher be'artzecha, that are in your land. The pasuk compares levemtecho, your animals, meaning your domesticated animals, ulechaya, and the beasts, that means your wild animals like deer or anything else that's not in the barn, in your pasture, but it's further out, that's more running wild in the pasture. As long as the chaya, who's not in your barn, is not a cow in your barn or a sheep in your pen, but is running free, has food to eat from the field that's growing naturally from the stuff, from the seeds left over from the 6th year, then you're allowed to use the Shemitah product that you stored in your house. But if the Shemitah produce that grew automatically in the field became depleted because they ate it all up, then it's become depleted for the animals that you have in your barn. You stored it away and you still have it. It doesn't matter. They're tied together. You have to remove it. Ugumiri, and we have a tradition. The wild animals do not eat from Yehuda, only eat in Yehuda. They don't travel so far. They don't go all the way up to the Galilee. And the same thing, and wild animals in the Galilee do not come all the way down to Yehuda. And that is true. Animals, when they roam, they have their territories. Like we know, like the tigers, the Bengal tigers have each one a territory that is theirs. And they literally, it's almost like there's a wire and they don't cross into their fellow's territory. Tanu Rabbanan. Now, here's the question. The rule, obviously, about Shavuos is an Eretz Yisrael Dika rule. What happens if by accident, and it has to be by accident, inadvertently, you take food out of Eretz Yisrael and you come to Chutz La'aretz? So, for an example, Jerry, who has, as we know, vegetation in the Negev, and for some reason he picks some, and then he has to rush back to Boca Raton, and he forgets it, he has it in his bag, and now it's Shavuos, and it grew by itself, now it's Shavuos. Now what happens? He gets the Chutz La'aretz, and he has to get rid of it. First, and he hears that the fields in Eretz Yisrael have been depleted. So what's the answer here? It says in Paris that left Eretz Yisrael and were taken to Chutz La'aretz. Again, b'shoigeg. Okay? Mavirim b'chol makim shehem. They have to be removed wherever you are. So if Jerry brought it to Boca Raton, then he does not have to go back to Eretz Yisrael. When he hears in Eretz Yisrael that things have been depleted, he goes ahead and removes it here and he gets rid of it here in Boca Raton. Shimon ben Elazar, no, he's got to make a U-turn. He's got to return back to Eretz Yisrael and remove it there. Mishum shenema asher be'artzecha, in your land. Boca Raton is not your land. Eretz Yisrael is your land. Okay, we are 52b2. Okay, and this is somewhere over here is where we're going to stop. Okay. But so the question is, he says, Rabbi Elazar, Shimon ben Elazar, you already used that words, Ba'artzecha, to teach us before. The idea of 3 lands and 3 subdivisions within each land. And Ba'artzecha is that as long as even in one of the subdivisions there's still food, you can eat in all the other places in the land. You don't have to be mevar, you don't have to remove, even where you, in your locale, it's already been depleted, as long as within the place, as long as in West Palm Beach, there's still tavua, then in Boca and Boynton, even if there isn't any more grains, you don't have to go ahead. You don't have to remove it. So you've used the word ba'atzech already to learn something, and we have a rule, once I learn something out of a word, it's not open to learn something else. Unless, says the Gemara, you're right. The pasuk said, and your animal, and your beast, that are in your land, learn up the word be'artzecha as if it says ba'aretz artzecha, in your land, in your land. So that teaches that I can learn two things. There are two words buried in one word. So I can learn one about the subdivisions are connected to the entire piece of land. And number two, I can learn this halacha over here, that you have to go back to Eretz Yisrael if you bring shvius products into Chutz La'aretz. Inami, the pasuk actually says, Asher be'artzecha. It could have just said, "Uleve'hemtecha in your animals, ulechaye in your beasts, be'artzecha in your land." What's the word? Asher be'artzecha. That are in your land. The word "that" is extra. Look again. If you guys turn back to 52b1, at the bottom of the left-hand corner, the top of the right-hand corner, look at the pasuk. Uleve'hemtecha, ulechaya. Asher ba'artzecha. It doesn't have to say that. It could simply say, Ulebehemta ulechaya bi'artzecha, in your land. The word asher, are, right, that's an extra word. Therefore, it's extra. I have a second thing to learn. Okay, we'll just give me 2 more minutes. You know what? We'll stop right here. We'll stop right over here. Reb Safra, Nafka, Eretz Yisrael, Chutz La'aretz, once, perfect.